Franklin. I'm the president of the Norfolk SEPAC, and this is our first event for the year, and we're really excited about all of the interest that we had in this workshop. We are actually a new team, new board this year, so we're really ramping up our activities and our parent workshops and fundraising efforts. So if you haven't already taken a calendar or a brochure, please take one on your way out if you are local to Norfolk. And thanks for everyone for joining. Joanne?
Hi everybody, Joanne Galbani. I am the Vice President along with Thais for the SEPAC this year. Again, we're very excited that we have so many people here. This is one of our biggest events so far, so really happy to see everyone interested in this topic. Brendan, and I apologize, pronounce your last name.
Mahan.
Will be joining us tonight, and Brendan is an ADHD and executive function consultant, so he works with families to, and those impacted with ADHD and executive function challenges to help evaluate the situation, redesign the approach to your life or their lives with your children, and help reduce the impact that ADHD and executive functioning challenges have on everyone's day-to-day lives. And if you're here, you're probably impacted at this point and understand that is a challenge day-to-day. So we welcome him, and we're looking forward to his presentation.
Cool. Hi. You just listened to me, so you know what's up. So yeah, as Joanne said, my name is Brendan Mahan. I'm an ADHD consultant, coach, and trainer, speaker, person. And the reason that I get to do this, there's a few of them. So first of all, I've got a master's in education and a master's in counseling, specifically school counseling. So there's that, right? Like I've got the education side of it done. I was a teacher for 7 years, primarily at the middle school level, teaching 6th grade English. So middle school is one of the times, it's really when executive functioning deficits become most pronounced. That's sort of when that happens. It happens again at high school, it happens again at college, but typically middle school is when that executive functioning deficit that comes with ADHD starts to become significant and a big, big problem. Also, English and writing is one of the most executive functioning heavy courses and activities that you're going to do. So that was my job, was like I had the class that caused the executive functioning frustrations and challenges for my ADHD students, and I didn't really get ADHD at the time. But I saw those kids, and I got those kids, like I understood them. And my heart went out to them, and I sort of knew how to help. And then I started learning bits about ADHD, and I was like, oh, this is easy, and things went more smoothly. But obviously, I don't teach anymore. So I shifted over towards guidance counseling. I was like, I'm going to be better at guidance counseling, because I've always cared more about a kid's emotional well-being than I have cared about their academic well-being, because emotions beat academics every single time. If you don't lock in those emotions and get that kid feeling safe and secure and balanced, they're not going to learn what you're trying to teach them. And I worked in some schools where they didn't really care as much about that. They cared more about the academic side. I struggled in those schools. And then I worked in schools where they were totally on board with me, and that was great. But I still felt like emotions mattered more to me than academics, and I was in the wrong spot. So I went and I got that second master's in school counseling. And I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but there's like 6 guidance counseling openings a year and like 47,000 people who want them. So those jobs are hard to get. And I kind of just was already doing ADHD work, because that was what I did when I was in grad school. I started dabbling and doing workshops and figuring this out, and now this is what I do. I like it better. It's much more variable, which is good. So I have all this experience. I've been doing it for 6 or 7 years now. And so just doing the job lets me stand up here. I come into people's houses. I make house calls and video calls. So I will come into your house, I will sit down with your kid, I will sit down with you, and I will work through the challenges that are happening. I help kids get their homework done. I help parents understand why their kids don't do their homework. I help them see the frustration that is homework. And I help parents communicate with school a little bit. I am not an advocate, But I can get you to the point where maybe you don't need an advocate, or I can point you to an advocate, depending on where we go, if there's some challenges at school. And I've done workshops for all the important groups. I'll be at the International Conference on ADHD next month. I was at the Massachusetts School Administrators Association 2 weeks ago, or last week actually. I've been in the Massachusetts School Counseling Association. They let me teach school guidance counselors, but I haven't gotten a job as one. It's weird. Life is interesting. So that's all the stuff, right? That's all the credentialing stuff that I've done, that I have. I'm also the father of identical twin sons who are 9 years old, which is a lot like having ADHD, even if you don't, but I do. So I live and breathe ADHD because I've had it for my entire life. I'm looking at you right now through the eyes of an ADHD person. My brain is the brain of a person with ADHD. So I know why your kid doesn't do their homework, because that's why I didn't do my homework. Right? Like, I get it. And that's why I know emotions beat academics, because I was that kid who was up until 1:30 at night because he remembered at 11 o'clock at night that he had a homework assignment that he didn't do, and it's really a big deal. And then he just waited to fall asleep because he didn't feel like he could go tell mom and dad, right? So the plan today is we're going to talk about ADHD. We'll do an overview. We'll talk a little bit about the emotional impact and lifestyle approaches and behavioral approaches, and then we'll move on to questions. Sound like a plan? First off, when it comes to ADHD, and I don't diagnose ADHD, that's not a thing that I do. I have people for that. I'm after the diagnosis. I'm like, okay, let's look at the problems and figure out how to solve them. But I don't do the diagnosis. And I don't care if you have a diagnosis or not. I only care that you have challenges. Does that make sense? If I can help, I will help. If I can't, I will tell you, and I'll find someone who can. So, one, there's a lot of ADHD lookalikes. ADHD can look like a concussion, lack of sleep. It can look like bipolar disorder. I pace a lot, camera. I'm very, very sorry. It can look like bipolar disorder. It can look like vitamin deficiencies. It can look like a lot of different things, some of which are psychological, some of which are biological. Lack of sleep is a biological challenge, right? It can look like poor nutrition. It can look like trauma. If you've got a kid who is experiencing trauma at home and is hypervigilant because they don't know if their mom is safe or they don't know if dad's going to show up at the school, that kid in the classroom is going to look like they have ADHD because they're not paying attention. But that's not an issue where the kid can't regulate their attention. That kid just has something much more important to worry about than the Byzantine Empire. Does that make sense? So when it comes to the ADHD diagnosis, consult your physician, your pediatrician, your school psychologist, your neuropsych people. Talk to them. It tends to be based on a person's history. Don't be afraid to get a second opinion. ADHD is horribly named. Horribly named. And this is where we're going to start today. For those of you who don't quite get it, for those of you who get it, I see you nodding, so awesome. So ADHD is more than just attention. The name makes it attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Good, we know what's up. It's a lot more than attention, which we're going to get into. It is in no way a deficit of attention. It's not. Because here's the deal. If you and I are talking, and I'm like, huh? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What? That's not me having a lack of attention. I'm just not paying attention to you. I'm regulating my attention poorly. I'm not pointing it where it needs to be, because I should be having my conversation with you, right? That's ADHD. The ADHD attention is, we have a trouble regulating it. We have a hard time pointing it where it needs to be. These phones don't help. Y'all in the audience who are neurotypical and don't have ADHD and still get sucked into this. Anybody thinking about their phone right now just because they saw mine? Anyone want to be honest about that? Yeah, so many of you are lying right now. It's not even funny. We know from studies, your attention has been pulled away just because you saw this. It's being pulled towards your phone. And if your phone is out and next to you right now, you can feel that pull. That's like having ADHD, except you don't have ADHD. It's worse for me. ADHD is not exclusively hyperactive. There's an inattentive form that has nothing to do with hyperactivity, which we'll also get to. That's my next slide. It is a disorder. ADHD is like life on hard mode. That's my new phrase for it. I've been using that for about a month now. It's life on hard mode. Everything is harder when you have ADHD. It's not cool. There's 3 kinds. Primarily inattentive, Pooh Bear. Right? Just kind of, the kid who's out to lunch. What happened? Huh? Huh? That kid? Primarily hyperactive, Rabbit. The kid who just never stops moving. They're fidgeting, maybe they pace when they present, I don't know. But they just never stop moving, they're always on the go. That whole phrase, driven by a motor, how many of you know that one? Right, it's in all the forms. Yeah, that kid, the hyperactive kid. And then combined, right, the kid who walks into walls because they're not paying attention and they can't stop moving. All of my jokes come from a place of love. That one has been undermined because I've interviewed 2 people for my podcast, both of whom told me their kid had actually walked into walls, like more than once. And I was like, okay, then I feel wrong telling that joke, but it's a good one, so I'm gonna keep it. That's ADHD. Those are our 3 kinds. I think eventually we're gonna find ADHD is just an umbrella term, and there's a whole lot more than 3 kinds. But we're not there yet. We haven't figured that out. We haven't locked that in. Because our science isn't there yet. We'll get there, but it's not yet. ADHD brings with it a lot of ne'er-do-well friends, let's call them. Comorbidities. Things like oppositional defiance disorder, conduct disorder, bipolar disorder, dyslexia, tics and Tourette's, Asperger's syndrome, which is now part of your autism spectrum disorder. This slide's a little old, I apologize for that. Anxiety and depression, speech and language, sleep disorders, dyspraxia, substance abuse, and obsessive compulsive disorder. For our purposes, I'm not going to go into autism spectrum disorder because that's a whole other workshop. For our purposes, the things we're going to be concerned with most, I suspect, oppositional defiance, seeing some head nods, anxiety and depression, probably especially anxiety. If you take out of the DSM, the diagnostic manual that psychologists use, if you pulled the description for anxiety out and the description for ADHD out, and you take the names off them and you give them to your typical person on the street and said which one's which, they would go, no, that one's ADHD, that one's anxiety. And maybe they'd guess right, maybe they wouldn't. They're that similar. And in the DSM, the description for ADHD is like, it's okay. We're going to go a lot deeper than the DSM does. So again, typical challenges, oppositional defiance, anxiety and depression, sleep disorders, and substance abuse. Those are our areas of concern, depending on the age of your kid. Hopefully, your 8-year-olds, we're not worried about substance stuff yet, but your high school kids, we might need to be concerned about that. Do any of you feel like you want me to do a little oppositional defiance stuff for a minute or two? Does anybody want me to head in that direction? That is plenty of people, because half of you are not raising your hands. All right, so this is my nutshell oppositional defiance. How many of you have walked a dog? This isn't me being rude to your kids and calling them dogs. Bear with me. Like all of you, I'm assuming, have walked a dog at some point in your life, right? Have you ever walked a dog that like you're walking them and then you bang left and the dog is like, and just hauls right for no apparent reason whatsoever? Anybody walk that dog? Yeah, right? That's your oppositional defiant kid. Here's what's going on. You're walking that dog and then you bang left. That dog gets scared because he doesn't know what the heck's going on and you just yanked on his neck. You with me? So he's like, what are you doing? That's what that is. That's what that pullback is. It's anxiety. Same thing's going on with your oppositional defiance kid. Because if I say no, there are fewer variables for me to have to worry about. I have more control over the situation. You with me? Am I thinking this consciously? No. That's not what I'm doing. But if I say no, then I don't have to worry about what's coming next. Because I think I'm in control. Same dog, if you walk and then you sort of stop and then you go left, the dog will be like, yeah, okay, let's go left. That's cool. Thanks. No issues. Same is true with your oppositional defiance kid. Communicate more calmly, give them more time to process the request. Communicate more gently, help them feel safe when you're having this conversation, and things will go more smoothly. Is this perfect? No. But if you think about your kid, probably it's when you're fighting that they're most oppositional, and when everything is chill, they tend to go along with what you want them to do. But they also have ADHD, so they cause stress, and they cause problems, and they do things late, and they do things in the wrong order, and they forget to do things. And you know what that does for you guys? It makes you upset. It makes you frustrated. And so you escalate, and you bring that escalation to your oppositional kid, and now they feel threatened, and now they're trying to defend themselves and protect themselves, and they're like, no, I don't have to. Is this pattern making some sense? So that's what's up. Did I just solve the problem? No. But hopefully I got you down a road that might be useful, because that's really all we can hope for. I am not a magic bullet. Even if you become my client, I am not a magic bullet. I'm not. My objective is to make things 10% better. 10% better today, 10% better tomorrow, 10% better the day after that. And then things fall off, because ADHD is nothing if not inconsistent. So like sometimes I am the greatest person walking the face of the planet. And other times I don't know why they let me out of my house. And that's the truth. There's days when I'm like, I don't know why. I had a day not that long ago when I was like, I don't know why I'm allowed to drive. I just shouldn't be allowed to drive. I'd been in a car accident the day before, and like my car was messed up. I then had my car taken to the wrong body shop, and then I couldn't find my keys to do anything about anything. And I was like, I don't know why I'm allowed to drive. I just shouldn't be allowed to drive. That's the best solution to this, because that was what had happened. It was just the way where I was that day. And then other days I'm like, I don't know why anyone else on the road is allowed to drive, because clearly you don't know what you're doing. But ADHD is nothing if not inconsistent. And know that for your kids' sake, for your sake, because don't disclose, but some of you in here totally have ADHD, because it's hereditary. Mom's got it, dad's got it, kids got it, right? There are days when you're amazing, there are days when you're not that great. So are your kids. Be patient with them. Days when they're struggling, support them. Sleep disorders don't help ADHD in any way. If I'm not sleeping well, I can seem like I have ADHD even if I don't. My wife does not have ADHD. Thank God, because we would be homeless. She's amazing. And she brings strengths to our family that I don't. And I bring strengths to our family that she doesn't. But when we had kids, when we had twins and she was not sleeping, it was like she had ADHD. She was forgetting stuff, she was dropping things, all kinds of stuff. And even now, when she gets migraines, like chronic migraines, every other day migraines, not exaggerating, I wish I was. And sometimes that affects her sleep too. She forgets stuff, she doesn't do things. Luckily, I'm not the jerk who's like, now you know how it feels, haha. I don't do that, because that's mean. I just try to take care of her and help her through. And I'm like, I hope she connects these dots, because sometimes I need her to give me a little bit of wiggle room. And substance abuse we'll talk about in a couple minutes. Because here's where it comes in, right here. Dopamine. How many of you have heard of dopamine? Anybody this sound familiar? Because it's kind of in pop culture at this point. How many of you have heard that it's like the brain's pleasure chemical or happy chemical? Anybody got that memo? Yeah. Take that information and kick it out of your head, because it's not true. It's kind of true. It's like layman's true, but it's not going to work for what we're going to do with dopamine. So I want you to dry erase that bad boy right out of your head. It's the brain's anticipation and reward chemical, which doesn't necessarily mean happy, because your brain just gets rewarded when the chemical hits it, and then your brain is like, woo! Except your brain doesn't experience emotions. It causes emotions in your body, sort of, but I'm not going to go that far into stuff. But it's not necessarily happy, it's just a reward. Okay, good. A thing happened that lights up the brain. People are like, what is he talking about? Don't worry, we'll get there, I promise. Here's what happens in the ADHD brain. My brain does not make as much dopamine as my neurotypical friends. Anybody here neurotypical? Can I have a token neurotypical person? Awesome. You're my token neurotypical. Awesome. So her brain makes more dopamine than mine does, right? What is your name again?
Karen.
Karen. So Karen's brain just is better. Where'd my water go? See? The ADHD, it's right there. Look at that. See? I have ADHD. It's orange. Come on, Brendan. I didn't fake that at all. I wish I did, because it would have been good, but I didn't. So Karen's brain makes way more dopamine than mine does, right? Also, her brain utilizes her dopamine really efficiently. My brain doesn't. Karen is driving a Prius of a brain. I am driving a Hummer of a brain. It's just not that efficient. And my gas tank is only halfway full. Hers is all the way full. We have to go to the same place. We have to do the same stuff. The same expectations from society are brought upon both of us. Is this making sense? Karen can take the scenic route to her goals. She can drive up the coast and check out all the cool shops in the area and still make it there. I have to go as direct as possible. And I have to refuel as I go. And so do your kids. So I have to figure out a way to get my gas tank from half full to all the way full or mostly full. How do I get more dopamine? Play is awesome for that. The things that motivate you are probably full of dopamine. But so is arguing. This is where the not happy stuff comes in. Arguing is full of dopamine. Some of you are like, oh no, some huge light bulbs just went off. For some people, it's pretty awesome to watch. Arguing is a dopamine hunt. That's what that is. So when your kid picks a fight with you, or when your husband picks a fight with you, or your wife picks a fight with you, or you pick a fight with someone else, you might just be chasing dopamine. That's entirely possible. In fact, it's plausible. Unless it's been going on for a while, and then you might just be stuck in a pattern where you argue about homework every night, because that's just what you do. So try to stop that and see what happens. But how, Brendan? How do we stop that? That comes later. So here's the thing about dopamine. My brain will chase it if there isn't any available. Okay? Which means if I'm in class and it's boring, I'm going to look for something better. I'm going to look out the window. That's the squirrel thing, which I'm not a particularly huge fan of, but Up was a great movie. That's the squirrel thing. It's dopamine. It's also an awareness, which is going to come next. Like movement. What was that? Right? Addiction is the root. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Dopamine is the root of all addiction. That's what's up. Yes, heroin is chemically addictive. But Facebook? Gambling? Shopping? Not so much with the chemical addiction there. That's dopamine, which is a chemical, so it's still a chemical addiction. It's just a chemical your brain makes all by itself. And video games, Facebook, they hire neuropsychologists and neurologists to consult with them to figure out how to get you addicted to it. Remember when like 3 likes was a big deal? I got 3 likes today, I'm so cool. And then it was 15. And now how many of you even know how many likes you get anymore? Anybody even care about that? No. But what about those emoji icons? Those are kind of cool, right? because Facebook was like, hey, the likes aren't doing it anymore. Let's change it. Anybody want to admit that even the emoji things are not that exciting anymore? They're not that great? Yeah, right? So you know what happens now? If we type a word, anyone type congratulations in the past 2 weeks or so? Yeah, right? Type the word rad, and you get the like thumb with a rocket booster shooting up through the screen, because I typed the word rad, and apparently Facebook likes that. So now words are starting to get stuff, animations that trigger the dopamine response. And video games, holy moly. Anybody have video game issues? Anybody's kids have video game issues? Yeah. Husband? Sure. Husband works too. Same thing.
Just TV addiction, like my kids
Sure.
little, they
Right.
get
Yeah.
away from
Stimulation. But video games specifically are designed to trigger dopamine, just like Facebook is. And you know what's cool about a video game? It never challenges you at a level that you're not ready for. It's never too easy and it's never too hard. If it's too easy, you go to the next level. If it's too hard, you don't get to that level. That's true for Super Mario Brothers, where it's really obvious, and it's true for Call of Duty, where it's less obvious. Now, admittedly, Fortnite is a different animal because you're playing with a bunch of other people, so the challenge is going to vary, right? But anything where you're mostly going against the computer, it's hitting the sweet spot all the time. Unlike the real world, which is sometimes too easy and boring and sometimes too hard and frustrating. And if I have ADHD, I have trouble with both of those, so I like video games better than the real world because it's in my sweet spot a lot more. Is this making sense? Put solid boundaries around video games and screens. An hour a day. My rules in my house, screens turn off at 6 o'clock. Unless we have like work to do, that's different. But social, silly stuff, done at 6. Because my kids go to bed at 8, best practice, no screens, no blue light, 2 hours before bed. They go to bed at 8. Then admittedly, my wife and I watch a show and then we go to bed. But even that's not all the time. Often we're reading. My kids get an hour of iPad time on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday and Saturday, the 6-hour rule, or the 6 o'clock rule kind of gets messed up because we might be going to a movie or something. So it's a little more variable then. And snow days count as weekend days, like those random days of no school. But if it's a school day, no way, man. No screen time. Unless we're doing something for school on the screen. And yes, they watch TV. I mean screen in terms of laptops and tablets and stuff. We have really strong boundaries around our kids' screen time. So the ADHD awareness is weird. Your neurotypical awareness is this flashlight, right? Karen is shining her, look at me remembering. Look at that, come on. Anyone else remember her name was Karen? So I gotta give myself credit where I just got some dopamine for that, come on. So Karen's attention is a lot like a flashlight. She's shining her light on me where it needs to be. She's like, I'm good, I'm happy, all is well, right? My attention, ADHD attention, is a lot more like a candle. For one thing, I'm lighting up the entire room. I'm paying attention to all of it. That's why I'm picking up on all the little nonverbals that people are throwing my way, smiling. I can tell who gets it and who doesn't get it. I can tell the people who are uncomfortable because they get it and the people who are feeling good because they get it. Like all of that stuff is with me, right? Also, my shoulder feels just a little bit weird, right? Like a little, I'm not really sure what's going on. It's a little uncomfortable. And now that I said that, there's an acute pain right here, which is stupid because that wasn't there and it's going to go away in 4 seconds, but it's there anyway. I have a little bit of like a headache thing happening because just a little too much screen time today, so mostly my eyes, a little bit back here. There's these really cool exit signs right there that are sort of lined up perfectly for me where one's pointing to the other. I just like it. It's neat. I can see my own reflection right across from me, so it's like the upside down on the other side. Did any of you guys watch that show, Stranger Things? It was really good, wasn't it? I loved it. I didn't think the second season was quite as good as the first season, but I dug like the kids on bikes thing and the sort of Steven Spielberg stuff that was going on. None of that matters. None of that matters. Who cares? I just got from a candle to Steven Spielberg in like no time flat. Because that's what my brain does. It's like a candle. It lights up everywhere. That's the squirrel thing too, right? We just pick up on stuff. Somebody walked over there, but it's a reflection, so actually they were over there. And I just saw them in reflection. Doesn't matter. It's just movement, right? You want to know why your kid is tapped by the end of the day? They're spending all of their school day trying to ignore the nonsense so that they can pay attention to the Byzantine Empire. How many of you remember the Byzantine Empire? Yeah, right? See what I'm saying? Who cares? Well, we learn about it. Someone decided it was important. Personally, I don't care. I'm a much bigger fan of ancient Mesopotamia. Another way that the ADHD attention is a lot like a candle is it kind of flickers and flares at times. Like there's times that I'm like, huh? What? I'm sorry. Because my attention flickered out for a second. It's not like I didn't pay attention the whole time. I just, for 3 seconds, poof. But I'm not sure it was 3 seconds because I wasn't paying attention. So it might have been 3 minutes. I don't know. 1 minute you were talking about a flashlight, and the next minute you were talking about Steven Spielberg. And I'm not sure what happened. And you might just have ADHD too, and you got there in like 45 seconds. And sometimes it flares. Sometimes I'm way too aware of what's around me. It's cold, and I can really tell. Like my hands are chilly right now. I don't know if anyone else's are. Or it's really hot, and I'm just like, I'm so hot, I can't do anything because I'm too aware of the hot, and I can't pull my attention out of the heat and the humidity to do the thing that I need to do. Anybody have that experience this summer? Oh yeah. Right? There were weeks when I only got done the things I had to do, and the stuff that was like better, the stuff that I ordinarily would do to like build the business and stuff, didn't happen. I met with clients and I edited a podcast, and that was all I had that week, instead of reaching out to contact people and book clients and book podcast guests and that stuff. So that's the ADHD attention. That's why it's different than the neurotypical. We are struggling to have a flashlight when what we're doing is using a candle. That's why part of my logo is a lantern. That little gray thing, that's a lantern, because that's my job. My job is to help build the framework around your attention so you can shine it where you want it to be and ignore more of the nonsense that doesn't matter. Executive function. Anybody excited? Yay! How many of you are done with executive function because you've heard enough of it? How many of you are like, what the heck is executive function? Anybody? Somebody is lying. Okay. Executive function. The prefrontal cortex, this part of our brain, right up here, is responsible for all of the careful decision making and planning and making things happen stuff. That's this. It's called executive functioning because it's like the executive in a company, right? They keep things organized, they make sure things are going where they need to go and people are doing what they need to do. We have a part of our brain that does that. If you have ADHD, it don't work so well. Because here's the deal. ADHD is not a behavioral disorder. It's not about behavior. It's about executive functioning, which we typically see through behavior. But it's not a behavioral disorder. It's a developmental disorder. Russell Barkley, who's like the ADHD researcher, he's starting to head towards, or he's there really, calling it a 30% delay. I don't love that because that gets tricky fast. 30% delay means that a 12-year-old is like 8.5, and that doesn't quite work for figuring out expectations. I like the old way, which is 1 year to 3 years of delay, and it varies depending on what the specific area of challenge is. But it also lets me say 2 years, like right in the middle, 2 years. Here's what that means. The 2-year delay means your 7th grader is in 5th grade. Now think about the expectations you have for a 5th grader versus the expectations you have for a 7th grader. They're very, very different. Your sophomore is in 8th grade. Your junior is a freshman. These delays matter. We won't talk about seniors just in case any of you have a senior and you're like, oh my God, they just became a sophomore. How are they going to handle college? I did. I figured it out. Those delays matter. Is everything delayed? Not necessarily. That's one of the great things about ADHD. Pick your menu, and it presents differently depending on who you are. Some stuff we're really good at. The cool thing is, most of these are skills, which means we can learn them. Working memory. Long-term memory, I remember what I did last year. Short-term memory, I remember what I had for breakfast. Working memory, I'm doing something, I get interrupted, and I go right back to doing it. Right? Some of you are like, what did he just say? That's not a thing. No one in the whole world has ever done that. Lots of people have. Just not members of the ADHD tribe. We tribe members, that is not a thing. We do something, and we get interrupted, and we're like, right, and then we go back into doing it. That's our baseline. When neurotypical people, when Karen is foggy and hasn't slept in a week, and she's like, what was I doing? Oh yeah. That's our normal, right? And then there's the time when you're doing something, and you get interrupted, and you're like, Diary of a Wimpy Kid? No way. What was I doing? You just totally forget you're even doing anything. You just wander away, right? Some of you are like, what is wrong with this guy? And others of you are like, yeah! Planning and prioritizing. It's exactly what it sounds like. We are terrible at it, but we can learn how to do better. I know, because most of my job is helping people plan and prioritize. Literally, like, I got really good at it because I became the person that I needed. Just like, what am I doing and when am I doing it and how do I prioritize stuff? We prioritize stuff by urgency. Like, this has to happen now because I don't want it to become an emergency. I just want it to be an urgency, right? You know the difference between an urgency and an emergency, at least if you have ADHD? An urgency is an emergency that only you know about. Right? That's the difference. And so we don't plan ahead. And we just go from urgency to urgency to urgency, and then every now and then we stumble into an emergency, and we're like, sorry to whoever I just disappointed, right? And you know what makes that extra hard? You know what urgencies and emergencies are full of? Dopamine! Ha-ha! So we're getting that thing that we need because there's a crisis. Does this make sense? Think about your kid's behavior. Think about your own behavior maybe and start connecting some dots because that's a piece of what's going on. But you can get out of that cycle. You just need to start looking ahead, which might mean you need to let something fall apart completely for a day. You need to be like, nope, the dishes are not getting done. My boss is going to be disappointed. I am calling in sick and I'm figuring out my week. And once I figure out my week, calling on a Monday. You do the week. And then you do this, get the stuff done, and then Friday hits and you're like, I have some space. I have like 2 hours. I am 2 hours ahead for a change. Take those 2 hours and plan for the next week. Organization. Right? That's not a thing. Folks with ADHD tend to be visually organized, which is different. That's why, like, in schools and offices and stuff, you can tell who has ADHD if you go into someone's office and you're like, oh, the paper. This is where all the paper went. Like, all of it. And there's, like, strata of, like, different years and stuff. Because visual organization. We need to be able to see it, so we just put it down. Oh, it's right there. And then you're like, do you know where the Johnson memo went? And they will walk into their office and stand at their desk and go, yeah, it's right here. And pull it out. Anybody see that phenomenon happen with a friend or a colleague? And you're like, how did they do that? You kind of just go back to how you felt when you put the Johnson memo down, and you get this like emotional visual memory. People are laughing because they're like, I've totally done that and I never thought of it that way. And you're just like, oh yeah, I remember because I was talking to Fred and like he was funny and I was feeling kind of happy and I put the memo down and it was like 3 years ago. It's right here. So how do we solve that? Hanging file folders in milk crates. Because milk crates don't close. So you still see stuff. Because a filing cabinet is just a box on the wall or the floor. That's all it is. It doesn't open. I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not. Filing cabinets don't actually open in the world of ADHD. Neurotypicals, you're like, what is he talking about? Tell your ADHD friends about how filing cabinets can actually open and you can put stuff in and take things out. They won't believe you. Because it's just not a thing that happens. The same is true with the crisper and the fridge, right? Like, I don't eat apples because you put them in the crisper and you close the crisper and then they cease to exist. You put them in there and then they like turn into mush and you take them out when they're mush. And that's like what it's, I don't know why they call it a crisper. They just call it a musher because that's all that they do in there. Because they just don't exist anymore. And sometimes you're smart and you are an ADHD expert and you're like, oh, cool, so I'm going to leave the apple on the shelf and then I'll remember to eat it. And then your kid gets, big enough to open the fridge and he eats your apple. You're like, man, so much for that strategy. So organization is a challenge too. Time awareness, notice that doesn't say time management. Because time management is organization and prioritizing and planning. That is different. Time awareness is how we process and understand and relate to time. I don't know about y'all, but me and time have a very strained relationship. Because people keep telling me that clocks are accurate and that like a minute is a minute and an hour is an hour, and I don't believe them. They're not telling the truth. They're lying. And I can prove it. Do you remember when you got your first job? And you went to your first job and you'd been there for like 3 hours and you went up to your boss and you were like, boss, I've been here for 3 hours and I know because I read the employee manual. It's the only time I'll ever do that, whether I have ADHD or not, unless I have autism, and then I probably read it every time. But I read the employee manual, and OCD people, they read it a lot too. But I read the employee manual, and it says that if I've been at work for 3 hours, then I get to take a break. So can I go take my break because I've been here for 3 hours? And your boss was like, you have been here for 40 minutes, what are you talking about? Do you remember that job that you had that was like that? Yes, you totally remember it. And then there was that person that you met, and you had that conversation with them that lasted for an hour, and it was the most deep, important conversation you had ever had up until that moment. It was probably like late high school, early college, in that range somewhere. And somehow in that hour, the sun went down and came back up again, and you were like, how is it tomorrow? Do you know that time? Yeah, see, a minute is not a minute, and an hour is not an hour. Typically, it's got to be something significant for neurotypical folks. You probably can name the 6 or 7 times in your life when that happened, right? See, Karen's got my back. She knows what's up. My ADHD people are like, what do you mean name the times that happened? That's just every day. Like, there's nothing unique about that. That isn't weird or special or anything. Because that's how we relate to time. Time for us is totally fluid and strange and makes no sense. If we're engaged, a minute is like nothing. An hour can be nothing if we're super engaged, like with a video game or doing something creative, painting, playing music, having a really good conversation, right? Writing a story. How did that much time go by? I don't believe it. And if it's boring and tedious, man, that 5-minute experience felt like a week. Like, genuinely felt like a week. And how has it only been 5 minutes? How is that even possible? And then we sort of remember stuff that way, right? Like paying bills, which is all of a 20-minute experience. For me, that's like an entire day. Like I have to devote a whole day to pay the bills because I know that's how long it's going to take. It's legitimately all day. No, it's not. It's 20 minutes. I know because I've watched my wife pay the bills because I'm married well. And my wife's executive functions are so sexy, it's unreal. Like she's got the hottest executive functions in the whole world. And also she knows that we would be homeless and have no electricity if I had to pay the bills. So, yay. I bring the social emotional stuff, so it's a fair trade. But so that time awareness stuff is hard. And that's not the only version of time awareness that gives us trickiness and gives us difficulty and makes life challenging, puts us on hard mode. The other one is called the time horizon. Anybody hear that? The time horizon is the point at which, in the future, where things become imaginary. For Karen, it's like 3 months out. Does that sound about neighborhood-ish? Yeah, it's still kind of, right? If I were to say to you, I will be back next week, and we're going to dig deep, or deeper, into ADHD, so I'd love to see you come back. Most of you are like, awesome, cool. If I was like, I'm going to be back July of 2021, and we're going to do some more ADHD. You guys are like, I don't care. Like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what that looks like. I have nothing. I went way past your time horizon. Even if I was said I'm going to be back over the summer, most of you are like, who cares? Seriously, dude, it's barely October. Here's where that matters. If something in the future doesn't feel real, I'm not going to do anything to pursue it. Right? ADHD folks, our time horizons, remember, neurotypical, like 3 months. That's why we have quarterly goals. ADHD folks, anywhere from like maybe a month, maybe. If you got a month, you're doing, your ADHD is not that bad. Probably more like a week, maybe as short as a day. Go ahead, execute on a long-term goal. If things become imaginary after 3 or 4 days, figure that one out. Does this make sense? You know how you figure that one out? You take that long-term goal and you break it down into small enough chunks so that something lands in your time horizon. You have to do a book report? Awesome. What are you going to do for the book report today? You're going to read the first 20 pages of the book? Is that what's going to happen? You're going to pick your book? Right? You've got to get some piece of it in their time horizon. So your kids who are getting these long-term assignments and then not doing anything with them, if the teacher's breaking that down into small chunks, you have to make sure you're staying on top of those small chunks. Make sure your kids are doing the things they need to do. And if the teacher isn't breaking it down into small chunks, you have to break it down into small chunks. And then you need to get a 504 or an IEP and make the teacher do it for you. Is this making sense? Thoughts, concerns, comments, questions? I should keep going? Okay. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's just, why did I do the thing that I just did? Why is this thing better than that thing? Like, it's meta. It's so meta. Dude. That's metacognition, right? It's learning. You know that whole wacky idea that, like, if you bring your kid down to the washing machine and you like do the laundry in front of them, they will learn how to do the laundry? Any of you have a kid that can actually do that? Because that kid is neurotypical. And most of you are like, no, and that's why you're in an ADHD workshop. Because ADHD kids are like, I don't know what any of that meant. You started putting clothes in the dryer, and I started thinking about SpongeBob SquarePants, and that's what happened. Like, that's what happened right there. And I don't know why you expect me to know how to do the laundry. You got to bring them down and then talk to them, both to keep them engaged and because they don't understand what you're doing. So like see how I put only the lights in and I kept this red sweater like way over here, because I like white shirts and I don't want pink shirts. And then like I put all the stuff in and then I put this much soap, see this much, like you bring them over like a dog that's in trouble for pooping in the room. Like this much soap, and you pour it in here, you close it and use cold water because hot water is just a waste of electricity. That's all it is. It doesn't do anything. And like tally ho, and then we wash it And we listen for the so we know it's done, and then we come back and we move it over to the dryer and we show them every single step. And then you assume that they forgot, and you do it again and again. And then maybe after the third time you see what happens. You're like, tally ho, little kid, fingers crossed. And you guide them when they need fixing, and you help adjust, and you don't freak out about it. You go, hold on a minute, this much soap. You don't go, no, that's too much soap. Because then, for them, right? And then they don't want to do the laundry anymore because you freaked out on them. Is this making sense? Is this helping? Okay. You guys are really tame. You're very chill.
We are absorbing.
Response inhibition and emotion control kind of go together. By the way, these are all taken from Smart But Scattered by Dawson and Garr. Some slight tweaks. I think that they have time management, and I change it to awareness, but mostly the same stuff. So response inhibition and emotion control go together. Emotions are what make us want to do stuff, right? Response inhibition is not doing the thing you want to do. So you tell me that I'm going to have McDonald's for dinner, and I want to jump up on a chair and do a little dance, but that's not appropriate because I'm 14, so I don't. Right? You make me mad, and I want to punch you in the face, and I do, and I'm 14, and that's bad, right? Like just not doing the thing that I want to do. And that can be big, obvious stuff like dancing on a chair or punching someone in the face, and it can also be, I just kind of want to play Fortnite, but it's a bad choice because I should do my homework. But I have a stronger pull towards Fortnite, because duh. And so I play Fortnite. I don't inhibit that response. Does that connect for you guys?
Would you use impulsivity as a synonym to response inhibition?
Yes. Response inhibition just makes me sound smarter. And it's also like it sort of defines it a little differently, right? Impulsivity has a bad reputation. And it makes, hang on. So I'm having a little bit of an asthma attack. Just my apologies. I apologize for being just too lazy and disorganized to breathe. I know that that makes me a loser and that I don't deserve to have a good life because I can't be motivated to breathe. And so I want to let you know that I feel deeply terrible about having asthma and needing an inhaler to help me breathe. I should just get motivated and breathe better. You're completely right. But I have to use an inhaler. So impulsivity makes it sound like they're just too lazy to bother to not do the thing that they want to do and that they suck at life, right? Kind of like how I suck at life because I had to do an inhaler because I can't be motivated to learn how to breathe well. See how stupid that sounds? Some of you laughed at me over it, right? But we do it to people with ADHD all the time. My soapbox is awesome for this one. Nonsense. That kid is not lazy. That kid has ADHD. That kid cares. That kid is motivated. That kid doesn't have skills. We got to teach him skills. It's literally what I do. But we moralize ADHD all the time. All the time. Nah, he's just lazy. Send that person my way and we will have a conversation.
Does that response inhibition also apply to like some crazy, stupid thought that comes across your mind? Hey, I'll go do it.
Mm-hmm. Here's a good example that isn't even too intense and wild, right? I am doing my homework. And in order to read my worksheet, I have to like rip it off. You know, sometimes you have to pull the top one off so you can see the back one, right? Strip that off, I do my homework, and I get this worksheet done, and as soon as I'm done, I'm like, I need a stapler. Anybody have that kid who will go all over the house looking for a stapler? You know what they're looking for? Come on, guys. Dopamine. Yeah, they're on a dopamine hunt. That's exactly what they're looking for. Because homework is stupid and boring. I know, I've done it and I've assigned it, and it was always stupid and boring. There's no scenario where it's not stupid and boring. There's some. I had some good homework assignments, but for the most part, I once made kids watch commercials. I can't do that anymore because technology has changed. But that's a dopamine hunt. Like, I need my stapler, and that's response inhibition. So too is, I feel like seeing if I can do that chair thing where like you step on it and then you tip it over nice and slow. That's also a response inhibition. Probably more what you were thinking. But it's still a dopamine hunt. Like, how cool would that feel? Like, I can feel the glide. Any of you feel the glide when I did this? Did any of you feel that glide? Because you probably have ADHD. I'm just kidding. That's totally joking. That's what this response inhibition is, absolutely. And emotional control is there too, right? Like, people with ADHD have trouble controlling their emotions. They have trouble managing them. Which means we get emotionally dysregulated really easily. And this is important. Because often we think about, how come my kid went from happy to mad so quickly? Any of you wonder that particular wonder? Right? Like, you're like, all the time. Don't wonder that anymore. That's not what happened. Your kid went, I want you to stop thinking of emotions as binary, like they somehow have opposites, because they don't. The opposite stuff, the binary stuff, is your kid's emotions are controlled or they're not controlled. I am emotionally regulated or I am emotionally dysregulated. You with me? If your kid is emotionally dysregulated, it doesn't matter what emotion bubbles to the surface. Whatever emotion comes up is the one that's going to show up. Think of your drunk buddy, right? I love you guys so much. You're the best. What are you looking at? He's my friend. Kick your butt. He's my friend. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I was such a jerk to her. Right? And whatever emotion bubbles up, out it comes, because your drunk buddy is emotionally dysregulated. And so too is your kid. Hopefully not drunk, just emotionally dysregulated. Just having trouble keeping those emotions in check. So if your son or daughter are running around the house like crazy people, or giggling like in that it's not going to stop giggle, not the like, and then they move on, but they're like, and you're like, you're getting a little creepy, you're starting to sound like a horror movie, please stop, right? Emotionally dysregulated. So of course they're going to go straight to angry or straight to sad, because that's what bubbles up next. Your kid's running around the house, hey, could you stop running? Stop. Why? Hey, sit down, right? Anybody have that moment? And then your kid cries or yells back or slams their door or whatever. Because you got emotionally dysregulated from their emotional dysregulation, which is a thing. Guard against it, but it's a thing. And then, poof, the next emotion that came up. You scared them, they behaved in a way that was scared. You made them feel anxious, they behaved in a way that's anxious. And if they have oppositional defiance, that anxiety might be leading to, I don't have to stop running if I don't want to, right? Is this making sense? Here's my number one piece of advice to keep yourself emotionally regulated. Don't get mad, get offended. It's a little thing. When you're a kid, and you're like, hey, can you go grab your plate off the table and put it in the sink? And they're like, yeah, no, first I have to do this thing. And you're like, huh? You know, like, that's offended, right? I said get your plate. That's mad, right? Be offended. Rein that frustration and anger in. Wait, what? Really? Come on. You don't even have to make whole words. And they'll get it. Whatever noises come out of you, just make gestures and glare at them like a little, like you're confused, but not mad. You know what I mean? Like, what? Seriously? So I'm a huge fan of the word seriously. Really? Come on. It's so effective because it confuses your kid. They're just like, what? Huh? Why is dad confused? He asked me to put my plate in the sink, and now he's confused. Oh, he's confused because I didn't put my plate in the sink. It might take him a minute. Or 5. Yeah, it'll work on a 6-year-old. I mean, if the expectations are right, you know. If you're like, build a birdhouse, and then they're like, huh? And you're like, that won't help.
Build a birdhouse, but
Yeah, just plate. And if they're like, I don't, plate. Oh, and they'll go do it. But be offended. Because when I'm offended, I'm not escalating my emotions, which means I'm not escalating their emotions. Does that make sense? And don't move if you can avoid it, right? Like if you're standing and the sink is here and the table's like over where my water bottle is, you don't necessarily have to move. As long as they can see you, right? If nothing's happening, come on. And take a couple of steps, but make sure they see you when you're doing it. They've got to see you move. Because you are anchored, like you can't be like, oh, weird standing, you have to be anchored, like solid base, boom, right? Come on, what? Really? And then, oh, okay, sorry. That's all it takes. And that's not me threatening like I'm going to take off my belt and beat you or anything. It's just proximity control. Because if I walk up the aisle right now like this, can you feel it that I'm closer to you now and how weird that is? Right? Like, I come all the way back here if I want to, and it's just uncomfortable. She moved, right? Like, it's, what the heck? Get away from me. You're supposed to be up at the front. Teachers use it all the time. That's how we control our classrooms. You can do it with your kids, too. Just go over, stand near them. Can you go grab your plate? Oh, sure. Absolutely, because you're over near me, and that's weird. I'll happily go somewhere else and do the thing you want me to do so that you're not near me, making it seem like I might be in trouble. You know what I mean? But you got, if they're already there, you stay where you are and take 1 or 2 steps if you have to. If they're nowhere near it, can you go put your plate away? Absolutely, off they go. It is. It totally is. It's not, you're right, it's not. But it can be. Like if you catch them when they're emotionally regulated, when they're just sort of distracted, it literally is this easy. Because kids want to do the thing that you want them to do. They want you to be proud of them. They want to be successful. They want all of that stuff. They lack the skills to do it. That's where the problem comes in, these skills. And also, I don't know how to make the laundry or do the laundry. Or I would love to put my plate in the sink, but I'm too short and I can't reach the sink. Or I would love to pour my own milk, but the milk is too heavy and I can't. Like that's in there too. But as long as they're regulated and what you're asking of them is realistic and reasonable, like 75 to 85% of the time, this is all you have to do, is just proximity control, speak calmly. If it doesn't work, act confused and offended, and then it'll go. Unless you're already in a cycle of what we do is argue to get things to happen. And then you got to break that cycle in order to get to the new thing. And that means consistently under-respond. And when your kid starts trying to fight back, be like, why are you yelling? I don't think it's unreasonable of me to ask you to put your plate in the sink. Why are you freaking out? And then now your kid's like, I just would, but when we yell, like that's how we communicate. And you guys have to break that habit, if that's a habit in your house. And your kid will respond to what you're doing. Like you're the boss, you're in charge. Be the boss. I'm gonna disconnect from ADHD and do a parenting thing really quick. I apologize, but this is probably useful. We parent out of fear too much in our culture. Here's what I mean by that. As parents, we feel the judgment of society bearing down on us all the time, right? And society does not approve. Add into that ADHD and the behaviors that come out of ADHD, and society really doesn't approve, because clearly you're a failure as a parent, because ADHD brings with it this moral judgment that doesn't happen for people with asthma, but does happen for people with ADHD. So our kids get judged and we get judged. Clearly you're a failure as a parent because your kid is making too much noise or can't sit at the table in the restaurant or whatever. Let go of it. Your kid is fine. You're doing the best you can. If your kid can't handle restaurants and you find that out when you're at a restaurant one day, just don't bring them to restaurants for a little while. I won't be upset with you. I will think you're doing it right. And too bad for society. Because when we feel like society is judging us and we're living this like feared life, like I'm afraid of what the world might think or what Dr. Spock is going to say or Dr. Oz or whatever. Don't worry about Dr. Oz, that guy, nothing good comes out of him. But like that anxiety that we experience as parents comes out in our parenting. And we feel like our kids should just listen to us because society seems to think that our kids should just listen to us. And so we get more stern and we get more loud and it turns into an argument and it turns into a fight and it turns us into jerks. Because what we're trying to do is get our kid to be afraid of us so that they'll do the thing that we want them to do. Even though we don't always realize that's what's happening. Trade the fear for respect. Respect your kid, respect your kid, respect your kid. Your kid will respect you back. It might take a little while because you might be stuck in the fear cycle. But if you want your kid to do a thing and you're like, come on, just go, you can do it, you can handle this. Give them the space to fail, give them the space to struggle, respect them, it'll come back. I know because I did this in my life. Like my in-laws are very like, they feel the pressure of society and my kids should just be able to sit at the table and like eat dinner when they're 3. And I'm like, no, that is not a thing. That doesn't make any sense at all to me. That's not developmentally appropriate. And I parented the way I felt was right. And I mean, they didn't really get on my case, but I caught the looks. You know what I mean? The like, you're doing it wrong. And I was like, no, I'm not. But you're not going to know that until like they're 9. And they're 9. And people pay me to help them parent now. So I won that fight. Trade respect. Trade the fear for respect. Let go of the fear. When you feel it from society, be like, nope, this is me feeling the pressure of society. I'm going to respect my kid. I'm going to respect their needs, and I'm going to recognize that they have skills that they lack, and I'm going to try to give them those skills. And the only way you can give your kid those skills is to let them fail, which means sometimes they're going to go to a restaurant and pitch a fit, and it's just going to happen. And I'm sorry, it sucks. I've been there. But you can totally do it. And I'm like soapboxing a lot today. The ADHD inhaler one is totally like a soapbox for the workshop, but that one was something else that I've just been seeing too much, and I apologize for sidetracking. We doing okay? Sustained attention. Clearly I'm failing at that tonight. It's just staying tuned in to doing the thing you need to do. If you have ADHD, not so much. I'm doing the thing. Oh, Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I need to get him on my podcast. Task initiation is starting. Starting, right? That's really hard for people with ADHD. So hard. Set a timer. You can do anything for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Just set a timer. I don't want to do it, but I can totally edit my podcast for 15 minutes. Set that timer for 15 minutes. That's the deal. After the timer goes off, if you need to go do something else, go do something else and set a timer for that too. If you're feeling like you can keep going, keep going. Is this making sense? If you have a kid, set a timer for them. I had a kid with ADHD writing an essay that was overdue. He had a rough draft and that was it. No, I'm sorry, I misspoke. He had an outline and the essay was due a week ago and he stayed after. This kid had ADHD. His parents thought I was like a miracle worker. And later on, I got better at it, so that's cool. Set a timer for him. I'm like, I was like, 10 minutes, dude. 10 minutes. Just go for 10 minutes. Okay. Timer goes off. Mr. Mahan, do I have to stop? No, keep going. That was when I learned the timer thing, like keep going if you don't want to stop. He wrote the whole thing in like an hour after school one day because I got him started with the timer, which was a strategy that I stole from Dr. David Dowell, who was the first guest on my ADHD podcast. It's called ADHD Essentials. Come listen to it. Shameless plug. So that task initiation can be hard. So too can goal-directed persistence, sticking with the thing until you're done. Time horizon factors into that. If we lose track of it because we just forget that we were even doing that thing because there was like a week between when we started it and when we did it again, right? The frustration, the emotional regulation and management of, I don't like doing this, it's hard, but I have to stick with it. That's challenging. I get emotionally dysregulated. I need someone to help me guide me through that. Mixed up in both of these is perfectionism. Task initiation is front-end perfectionism. I'm not even going to try because I won't do it perfectly. Goal-directed persistence is back-end perfectionism. I don't know, should it be a semicolon or a comma? I can't turn the essay in yet until I figure that out. Done is better than perfect. It is. Done is better than perfect. Just do it. Risk the judgment, because that's really what you're afraid of, is the judgment. The more you put yourself in a position, or your kids in a position where they have to risk judgment, the better off they're going to be in the long run. If something makes your kid anxious, encourage them to steer into it. Don't force them, but encourage them very strongly. And if you can't get them to do the thing that makes them anxious, figure out something else that you know will make them anxious, that they don't know will make them anxious. Like sports is a good example of this. And make them do that. But when you make them do it, say to them, the reason we're doing this is because it's going to be hard, and you have to learn how to do things that are hard. And I love you, so I'm going to make you do this thing that is hard. That's why my kids play soccer. And they know that's why they play soccer. It's also why they played basketball. They want to go back to basketball. But how tall am I? So I'm like, totally play soccer. It's like, I know, I played basketball, I love basketball, I have a basketball brain, but physically it's not a plan. Totally play soccer. Flexibility is the ability to sort of go with the flow, right? But there's sort of a good one and a bad one. We're good at like the crisis. We're good at those. Like, oh my God, there's this thing that has to get fixed right now. I can totally handle it. The thing that we're bad at is when our, like, the pattern gets disrupted. Do you know what I mean? Like a delayed opening. It just throws the kid's day off completely. Or a Monday holiday. I hate Monday holidays. I hate them so much. Because I don't recover until Thursday. Because it's weird. Like the day's weird and it's messy and it's not I hate Monday holidays. So we struggle in times of transition. That flexibility is hard for us when there's a transition. Do you know how many transitions you have in a day? Like billions. Not really, but it feels like that sometimes. Transitioning from one activity to another. Transitioning from one friend to another. From talking to your kid to talking to your spouse. All of those are transitions. And they're really hard. Going to work is hard. I have a client who, he's an adult actually, and I make him go to the library. I'm like, no, dude, do work in the library. Because the drive from your house to the library will let you transition into the thesis that you have to write. Because when he stays home, he doesn't get anything done. Because there's no built-in time for transitioning. But that drive lets him, he's thinking about the thesis, he's planning it out, and then he does it. As opposed to at home when he feels like he has to just sit down and write the thesis and he's not ready. And so he's like, I'm not ready, I can't do this. And then everything spirals out of control. But he drives to the library, he's good to go. Build in time for transition. Even if it's something fake, like going to the library when you don't have to. Thoughts, concerns, comments?
I have a question.
Shoot.
With flexibility, especially with younger children, do they need to know what happens next? Do you need to tell them like the whole day, kind of ask them what they think?
Yeah.
Because
So the
sometimes
question
I
is,
don't tell your kids anything, don't ask their opinion, tell them what happens.
No.
Versus, yeah, like I don't
no.
And like for my child, he needs to know.
Yeah. So the question is, is part of flexibility letting your kids know what's going to happen in the course of the day? You totally do that, yes, absolutely. If they can have a say in it, give them a say in it. It should not always be, this is what's happening, too bad for you. Like, hey, we're going to go to Walmart, and we're going to go to the bank, and then we have to go to the pet store to get some dog food. What do you want to do first? Because it doesn't really matter. Like, that's a way to let them have some control over it. And a lot of your kids need control. Like, they need control. And most of the time, kids who need control come from parents who need control. So there's a conflict there, right? Seemingly. But there isn't. Give them control, and you will find that you wind up with more control. Because what you get when you give them control is respect. And what respect gives you is more control over your kid. Is that making sense? It gets better. By giving them control and letting them make choices and letting them figure stuff out, you're teaching them how to problem solve. You're teaching them how to manage having control, which they're going to have eventually. The last thing you want is for them to go to college and that's the first time they'd really have control. Because those kids go crazy. I know I was an RA. So yeah, all of that.
Question related to the
Shoot.
go forward, but
I'll jump around. We're running low on time. I'll
sort of
skip.
previewing and sort of planning the day and things like that. How do you couple that with a kid who, when you tell them anything a day in advance or 4 hours in advance, all they'll think about and they'll just spin on.
Know your
We're
kid.
going to go to the pet store
Okay.
6 hours from now and I'm going to see a hamster, but we still have to get through the day and not hear about the hamster.
You know your kid. Don't tell them about the hamster. If that's not going to work, don't do it. Be like, we're going to go to the bank and we're going to go to Walmart. And then I feel like there's something else we need to do, but I'm not remembering what it is right now. If your kid can handle that, you're being a little unsure, which is also good because you're showing that mom's not perfect and dad's not perfect. And the sooner they learn that, the better off you are. That's a choice, right? Or you could be like, they don't know what roads do. Like until you get a license, you don't know what roads do. So you can always conveniently drive by the pet store if you have to. Hey, don't we need dog food? Even though you drove 5 minutes out of your way to do it. Like if you have to, you can fake it that much. And also you can just tell the kid later. You know, like you know your kid. So if something else is going to cause anxiety because now they're anticipating it, just don't bring it up. We talked about age minus 2 years. Take the long view of your kid. It's not about 6. It's not about 14. It's not about 3rd grade. It's about raising a healthy, well-adjusted 26-year-old. You're going to be okay. It's going to work. I did work in a preschool, did some stuff with them. There was a grandmother there who was worrying about how her 3-year-old daughter didn't know what a rectangle was. And I was like, I don't know any adult that doesn't know what a rectangle is. You don't need to quiz your daughter on your granddaughter on rectangles at home. Like you don't. She's going to be okay. Breathe. Take the long view. It changes everything. Because it's not about this fight. It's about what this fight means in the bigger picture. Is this useful or can I let it go? Is it a deal breaker? Or can I let it go? Is this something my kid has to have right now? Is this a thing I have to win? Sometimes it is, yeah. But more often than not, we can let go of that. And when we let go of it and we do that the right way, we give them a good reason, we earn respect instead of creating fear. We just say to our kid, like, hey, you know what? This homework assignment's killing you. I can tell. You're done. I'm not making you do this homework assignment. I'm going to write a letter, message your teacher. This doesn't happen all the time. This is like a one-shot deal. You're going to get one of these a quarter or whatever. Like, we don't want them to just turn into homework avoidance. But like, this is tapping you out. So we're taking a break. We're stopping. We'll come back in an hour. Depends on what time it is. If it's 9:30, that homework assignment's over. Maybe they try it in the morning. If it's 4:30, come back after dinner. But let your kid take a break. You don't have to push through. At least not when you're a little kid. Sometimes as an adult you do. But one of the ways you learn how to push through is when you're like 10, you do that homework assignment till it becomes way too hard, and then you stop, and then you come back to it. And then you succeed, and you're like, oh, I pushed through. It was just a little bit of a different style. Look at what your kid is good at. It's all about strengths. A lot of us as parents worry about what our kids are bad at. I don't care what your kid is bad at. I mean, I do, because you're going to hire me to fix that. But whatever your kid is bad at, whatever their weakness is, shore that up just enough so it doesn't hurt them anymore, and then focus on their strengths. And can help you shore that up. But my wife is not the greatest at math, and I am not the best at paying bills. So you know what we do for our taxes? We hire someone, because that's not our skill set. We've shored that up just enough so it doesn't hurt us, and then we outsource that bad boy. And there's lots of stuff you can do that with. I mean, I wish I could do it for the lawn, but there's not enough money in the budget. But take a strength, like focus on what you're good at and do the stuff you're good at. And let your kid do the stuff they're good at, even if it's art. There's ways to make money with art. Just don't be an artist, be a graphic designer. Work for Coca-Cola. Get into marketing and advertising. Curiosity and empathy when you're talking to your kids. Hey, why'd you do that? How come? What's going on? All behavior is communication. There's no such thing as misbehavior. That's not a thing. That kid who is misbehaving is trying to communicate something. When it's ADHD, a lot of the time it's overwhelm and anxiety and that kind of stuff. Find out what they're communicating. What do they need? How can we get them their need in a different way so they don't engage in this misbehavior, in this inappropriate behavior, this unexpected behavior? How can we get them to do it differently? If what they need is attention, can we just give them some attention in the morning so that when they come home from school, they feel connected to us? Can we write a little note on their lunchbox or on their sandwich so that when they pull their sandwich out, it's like, hey, Sally, I hope you did great on your continence quiz. I love you either way. And, oh, Mom loves me. Don't do it all the time because then it loses its effect, but like randomly, you know, especially if the kid's going to have a bad day or had a bad day or something. Oh, cool. Oh. Even high school kids, do it. Put a random sticker on their lunchbox, something like inside. You'll be amazed what even high school kids would like. And they might be like, Mom, that was so corny that you did that. It was so corny, but I so loved it, oh my God. Just do it. And problem solving. That's all it is. It's just a problem that needs to be solved. Get as much of that emotionality out of it as you can. And it's your kid, I get it, right? Like with my kids, it's harder for me to get my emotionality out of it for my kids. So I'm not saying that you're gonna do it perfectly every time. I have no expectations of perfection in any way for anybody. But try to like, is this a deal breaker? What is the problem? What's the real problem? That's there too. Sometimes parents think the problem is one thing and the kid thinks the problem is something else. And we get a conflict. Like I was at a client's house one day. Daughter came over, he goes over to his daughter. He was on the couch. Daughter comes in, puts pencil box, like art supply stuff, like markers and things, on top of the TV, which is like this thick. So like not a plan, right? The dad's like, those are supposed to be in your room. Why aren't those in your room? Well, because my little sister keeps trying to steal them. But those are supposed to be in your room. Bring them upstairs, put them in your room. But my little sister keeps trying to steal them. We're not talking about the same problem, right? But dad is caught in that fear stuff that I talked about earlier. My kid should just listen to what I say. I'm the boss. Right? He's stuck. He's not hearing what she's saying. She's completely reasonable. But my kid's sister keeps trying to steal them. They're down here because I'm afraid I'm going to lose them. Not because I'm trying to be disrespectful. But what he's hearing is, you're being disrespectful. I don't respect your dad. Now, admittedly, the girl does not respect the dad. But that's because every time she brings a problem to him, he doesn't hear it. And he's not doing it right. I've remedied that mostly. But that's where they were at the time. By the way, not really a client, totally a friend of mine. Like they were banging heads. He wasn't listening. So that might be in there too somewhere. You might be hearing one problem while your kid's trying to tell you something else. Find out what they're really saying. And then teach your kid how to problem solve. As much as you can, outsource that nonsense. And my little sister keeps trying to steal it. Okay, so what should we do about that? Huh? I'm 7. What do you mean, what should we do about that? Well, what do you think? The ideas might be terrible, but they're not going to get practice problem solving if you solve all the problems for them. That's not a thing. And then they're going to roll into high school and they're going to go to a party and someone's going to be like, here's this thing you shouldn't use. And they're going to be like, I don't know how to get out of this situation. And did I mention that addiction and ADHD are a thing? Problem solving. Let's get that going. So the wall of awful, right? Has it been a hard enough workshop? Should I skip the emotion side? Okay. This is what I'm presenting at the International Conference on ADHD. So, the wall of awful is the emotional barrier that prevents us from taking risks and initiating tasks. It's a trauma model. In this case, the trauma with regard to ADHD, looking at the wall of awful through that lens, is caused by repeated failure. It's trauma by a million little cuts. Because if I'm struggling in all of these areas, and I am because I have ADHD, to various degrees, it is a lot harder for me to succeed. Does that make sense? Kids with ADHD fail more. Even worse, kids with ADHD get significantly more negative feedback than their peers. And as a country, we give people too much negative feedback anyway. It's between 3 and 5 to 1, negative to positive. For every positive piece of information, we tend to get 3 to 5. To offset one positive, to offset one negative, we need like 3 to 5 positives. So it's not working. And there's totally a correlation in relationship success and failure based on what that percentage looks like. You want it to be closer to 3 negatives and 1 positive, or 2 negatives and 1 positive, because the further towards 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the more likely that relationship is going to fall apart. So the wall of awful is the emotional barrier that keeps us from taking risks and initiating tasks related to an area that we have failed at a lot. Everybody has a wall of awful. Everybody, even our neurotypical friends. Everyone's got something they fail at a lot. It could be mowing the lawn. It could be losing weight. It could be doing the bills. It could be asking someone out. It could be doing your taxes. There's lots of stuff. By way of example, when you go to ask someone out, that ask holds within it echoes of every other ask you've ever made. Does that make sense? I mean, I didn't think I was boring, but it's like every presenter's nightmare. So in that ask is just echoes of all of those other asks. And all of those asks went wrong, otherwise you wouldn't be asking this person out. Unless you're polyamorous and totally do your thing. One of my best friends, down with it. It's not the same one. Totally not a big deal. But you want to know that that's there, and you want to know that that's there for your kids. Because if your kid has a wall of awful for homework, which by the way is totally where this comes from, is explaining why kids don't do their homework. If your kid's got a wall of awful for homework, and they have a wall of awful for math, and now they have to do their math homework, that's 2 walls of awful. So here's how it works. And I'm totally going to tell you how to get past it. Don't worry. But first I have to make things as miserable as possible, and then comes the hope. It's like a storytelling technique. I was an English teacher. It's just rising tension. So here's how the wall of awful gets built. Every time we fail, we get a little failure brick in our wall. Along with the failure brick, we get a disappointment brick, because we disappointed ourselves. But we also get a disappointment brick for everyone whose opinion of us matters, who knows about this failure. So if I don't do my homework, I miss my math homework, me, mom, dad, my teacher, if there's a classmate connected to it for some reason, maybe the classmate, if my sister has been tutoring me in math, or I have a math tutor or something, that person too. Is this making sense? It doesn't matter if they know that I didn't do my math homework. I still feel the pressure. Does that make sense? That's why we can have the cultural pressure of just make your kids be afraid and do the thing you said to do. That's why that can affect us even when it's just me and my kid in my house, because it's still there. So failure, disappointment. Along with our disappointment bricks, we get rejection bricks, because when we disappoint someone, we feel like they're going to reject us socially. Whether they do or not doesn't matter. Unless they get in real quick. If you mess something up and mom's like, it's not a big deal, don't worry about it, none of those bricks land. Especially if it's a parent or a guardian or a boss or something. Because if I don't do, let's say I didn't make my bed because we're in a rush, right? I'm like, I didn't make my bed. And mom's like, it doesn't matter, don't worry about it. now that doesn't even feel like a failure anymore. Because the only reason I care about making my bed is because my mom told me to. And I finally ingrained that thing as something I need to do. So if mom gives me a pass, potentially none of these land. Does that mean that we should constantly give our kids a pass? No! But it means we need to be mindful of how we communicate with our kids and whether we're making their walls of awful bigger or less. And if sometimes you have to make them bigger, but maybe only make it this much bigger instead of that much bigger. Tone of voice, word choice, that stuff matters. So we've got failure, disappointment, rejection. Other stuff comes in too. Worry, anxiety, fear, doubt. Some are blocks, some are bricks. They all start filling up. Is this making sense? In order for me to engage in that task the second time around, third time around, I have to tangle with this wall. Some stuff happens, you fail at it, you don't get a wall. Because it's just not that many bricks, whatever. You walk right past it, metaphorically speaking, right? But eventually you fail something enough, we start to get this wall. So how do we get past it? How do you get past the wall of awful? 5 ways people try. 2 don't work. 1 works but is not healthy. 2 work. The first thing people try to do with the wall of awful that doesn't work is they stare at it. It's a really big wall. Yep, right there. Whew. Nothing. You're not engaging with the task. You're not engaging with this fear. It's just there. It doesn't work. The other option is people try to go around it. But you're never going to go around it. Because it's a metaphor. And it's infinitely wide. I know, because I made it up. There's no scenario where you're going around the wall. You're just going to go do something else instead. You're going to get distracted. The first way that gets us past it that is unhealthy is to Hulk smash your way through the wall of awful. Fine, I'll do my math. God! Right? That's a thing. Anybody have that conversation? Or my essay or my Byzantine Empire homework? I'm picking on the Byzantines today. Because it's an emotional barrier. And you need a strong emotion to get through it. And anger is a very strong emotion. But it's not always an external smash. Sometimes we smash internally. What's wrong with me? Why do I suck so much? Why can't I just do this? Why can't I just do my stupid math homework? God. Now, instead of damaging my relationship with my mom, I'm damaging my relationship with myself. Right? My self-esteem is taking a hit. By the way, fight, flight, and freeze are typical responses to stress. So what do? We can climb it. It's a much longer process. Climbing it means sitting with those emotions and processing those emotions. And maybe we know we're doing it, and maybe we don't. But you can totally go home to your kids or your husband or your wife and be like, hey, I learned about this thing called the wall of awful. I'm going to walk you through it real quick. And then the next time they look like they're stuck, you can be like, are you climbing the wall of awful? And they might go, yeah. And sometimes you get lucky and they go, no, I'm just spacing out. And you're like, awesome, do the thing. But usually it's, yeah, I'm climbing the wall of awful, I'm stuck. And often just bringing awareness to the fact that we're stuck and that we're climbing the wall of awful gets us past it faster. And because it's a metaphor, we can talk about like icky emotions and all those things that make us feel uncomfortable and vulnerable that we never want to do in a way that doesn't quite point straight at it. So we can own up to vulnerability, own up to fear, without having to get too wrapped up in it and being able to move on a little more easily. Does that make sense? So climbing it is sitting with those emotions, recognizing those emotions, knowing that something is hard, But also we can build climbing muscles. We can get stronger by facing those challenges. Every time you face and overcome a challenge, you get stronger. You get better able to navigate the anxiety that problem causes for you. It's called exposure therapy. It's a real thing. We help people with like phobias do it. The more we steer away from the thing that makes us nervous, the more anxious we get about it and the harder it becomes to do. Even if that thing is going to school. So we can get stronger and climb faster. We can learn skills to climb more effectively, like teaching your kid how to break that assignment down. And the other option is to just put a door in it. It's an emotional barrier. Change your emotional state. Right? My friend, my client, who goes to the library, he's climbing the wall of awful. That's what that is. He's climbing in the car ride there, and if for some reason that wasn't enough, he's putting a door in it when he gets there because he's in a different place. He's got different emotional ties to the library. And at this point, he associates the library with productivity. So he bangs stuff out there. Music. Any of you ever had that time where you're like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. I am not going to the gym. No, I thought I was going to do it, and now I'm just, and then someone plays the Eye of the Tiger or puts Metallica on or something, and you're like, I'm going to the gym! Oh my God, I need big heavyweights right now. Right? Because that's what emotions are, music plays with our emotions, that's what it does. I like to listen to podcasts. I listen to really successful people talk about how they're really successful and how they did that. And I'm like, I want to be really successful. And then I just go edit my podcast that I hate to do so much. Here's the tricky part. Climbing it looks a lot like staring at it, and putting a door in it looks a lot like going around it. Hey Mom, I would love to do my homework, but can I watch an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants first? Are you putting a door in the wall by changing your emotional state into a happier, giggly mode so you can do your homework? Or are you trying to go around it? I don't know. I'm not their parent. But you guys can figure that out. I'm confident because you're all very smart people. I know you're smart because you came here instead of watching TV. Or are you sitting there looking like you're stuck because you're climbing the wall or because you're actually stuck? Does that make sense? You ever have that kid that like they take their binders out for like 20 minutes? Yeah. And you're like, just get, oh, boom, and you flip the binder open and turn to the page they need to be at, and you're like, do your homework! Did you ever have that conversation? And then they do what? Walk away. What else? Cry. Get mad. Hey, you know what all that sounds like to me? Boom! They're Hulk smashing. Because you just said to them, you need to change your emotional state right now, immediately. And they're like, well, okay, I'll get angry or frustrated and I'll Hulk smash. The kid who walks away is like, I suck, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? I don't want to yell at my mom. And so off they go, right? Because they don't want to fight. But that's what's going to happen. So they're not going around it. They're getting out of the fight. It's still a fleeing, it's just they're fleeing a different thing. Because they weren't taking their binders out. They were climbing the wall of awful. Does that make sense?
So how do we get them there? How do we put the door in it?
Teach them about the wall, because that'll help them climb it faster. And then you can say, hey, are you taking your binders out, or are you climbing the wall of awful? And they'll be like, taking my binders out, especially if they're a middle school boy, because emotions are weird and yucky. But they'll know, and it'll go a little faster. You'll be like, awesome, how much time do you think you need to get your binders out? Like 3 minutes, 5 minutes? 3, okay, cool. I'll be back. Tally-ho. Just bounce, give them that space. That's what they need. They just can't do it for 20 minutes because we don't have 20 minutes. We got to eat dinner, we got to go to soccer practice, you need to go to bed. You know what I mean? But give them that space to process that those emotions. And if you have to speak in code, you come to wall of awful? No. Okay, well, how much time do you need to get your binders out? You might just start referring to it as getting your binders out. Like, that might happen in your house, and that's okay. Let them have a code, especially middle school boys, because we are an awful culture for men and emotions. Awful. It's like my next slide. Because there's usually an emotion hiding underneath that anger. It probably makes you feel vulnerable, especially if you're a dude. And we are not allowed to feel vulnerable, right? That's not a thing. Oh my God, that's terrible. I don't really care anymore, but typically, I'm not your typical dude when it comes to emotions. We're not allowed. We're not. So when we feel rejected or afraid or humiliated, frustrated, you name it, when we feel vulnerable, I don't care what emotion you want to plug onto it, we come back with anger. You know why? Because anger makes you feel vulnerable. That's why. And then I can pretend that I'm not. That's all there's to it. So if someone in your life is getting mad, one, they're emotionally dysregulated, help them de-escalate if you can, or bounce. If it's not safe, please contact the people that you need to contact and get yourself safe. But if it's just your kid gets angry a lot or your wife or husband sort of gets cranky, start to wonder, hey, what emotion might be hiding underneath that? Think about the interaction prior to. And what was that? Did they feel rejected? Do they feel frustrated? Have they been complaining about work all day or complaining about their teacher all day? And then they blow up because you ask them to make their bed and you know that's always frustrating for them because every time they try to make their bed, like the fitted sheet pops off or something. And maybe they're just full of frustration for that day. I don't know. But kind of piece it together, see what you can come up with. And then have a conversation later. Hey, you know what? I was thinking about earlier when we were banging heads a little bit. Don't say when you snapped at me because that's going to ruin the whole thing. Because now they're defensive. We don't want them defensive. Remember when we were banging heads? I was thinking about how, like, I know I was feeling frustrated, and maybe you are, I'm not sure, but blah, 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 right? I totally wasn't feeling frustrated. I completely lied. But I said I was so that you can have permission to feel that way. Is this making sense? Because I'm guessing here. I might be wrong. But I just mentioned I felt vulnerable, and that opens the door. And then I think, I don't know, maybe you were too, I'm not sure, right? My lack of certainty is I'm given so much wiggle room. Do you see all this wiggle room I'm given? That's how you get someone to admit that they were feeling vulnerable. You have to give them all kinds of room. And then you might get something. I'm comfortable being wrong. I say that all the time. I'm comfortable being wrong. It's totally cool. Yep.
My child loves to stuff all these vulnerable emotions, weeks, months, years.
How old?
12.
Okay.
And so he's angry.
Middle school boy. He's 12. Yep.
He's angry all the time, and you can't pin it to something simple. My own 6 or 7, like he was
Right.
frustrated about one thing.
Yep.
It's like years of things. And
Sure it is. It's a wall of awful.
he won't verbalize it.
It's the wall of awful.
Yes.
That's what that is. That's what the years is. That's years of bricks laying and laying and laying and laying, right? That's what's up.
But then when you try to reach him on those vulnerable things and really be empathetic,
Yeah, don't do that.
he just puts you in the denial box.
Of course he does. He's not allowed to be vulnerable. He's a 12-year-old boy. He's not allowed. So tell him that. Hey, you know what? You're getting frustrated, and I totally get it. I understand it. Because here's the deal. I love you, and you are a 12-year-old boy, and you are not allowed to be vulnerable. And that's okay. I'm not going to ask you to be vulnerable. I'm not going to ask you to tell me about how anything. I just want you to know that I love you, and I held you when you were your most vulnerable. Literally, like if I dropped you, you would have been goo. It was terrible. Throw in the jokes because it alleviates the you have to Guardians of the Galaxy it. As much as I don't like what that movie did to all the rest of the Marvel movies with not having any real moments at all ever, you have to do it. You like decompress with some humor or something, but let them know, like it's okay. And then bounce. Don't stick around. Don't ask for processing. I just want to let you know, like I know things have been hard for you and you're probably feeling frustrated or scared or something. I'm here. I'm safe for you to talk to. And you are welcome to talk to me right now, but I have zero expectation of that. I just want to let you know. So if at some point you do want to talk to me, you can. Gone.
So don't press them.
No. Because that makes them more vulnerable. It's like you got a sword and you're like, you feel bad, don't you? They're like, no, I totally do. I'm sorry. You know, like stuff is hard. You can come to me if and when you're ready. You can also talk to Dad. He was a 12-year-old boy once. In case there's 12-year-old boy stuff that I won't understand, go talk to Dad. Make sure Dad knows you said that and make sure Dad can handle that conversation. And then bounce. Because now when he comes to you, guess what he has? Control. There's some themes here. You guys seeing them? Right? Control, dopamine. Lower expectations, not because your kid isn't great, but because they're developmentally delayed. Your 12-year-old is 10, and that's allowed. Meet them where they are. So real quick, some lifestyle management stuff. Sleep, oh my God, do it. Go to sleep. How old's your kid? Pick the hours. Make sure they're getting that much sleep.
And what if they don't? They cannot fall asleep.
Because they have ADHD, of course they can't fall asleep. Right.
What would you do? Would try to appease them?
You could help them go back to sleep. You could give them something to do if they're awake. You can find stuff on YouTube that's like little meditative relaxation stuff that you don't want to have them watch at 4 in the morning. But if they learn the strategies from the video, they can apply them at 4 in the morning. Make sure that they have not had too much to drink within like an hour or two before bedtime, because they might just be waking up because they got to pee at 4 in the morning. That's a thing. It's going to be hard. I'm not pretending it isn't, but the more sleep they can get, the better. Don't let them say, I don't have to sleep. It's a really small percentage of the population. I know I'm fuzzy-brained a little bit tonight. You guys might not be able to tell. I can tell. I'm normally much tighter. But I have, like, it's been a long 2 weeks, guys, of not getting to bed on time because I've been having workshops. So you got to get to sleep. And sleep hygiene matters. No screens at least an hour before bedtime. It's really 2, but no one wants to hear that. Dim the lights, right? My folks in the back are maybe a little tired, more tired than the folks in the front because it's brighter up here than it is back there. Dim the lights, right? Thomas Edison was a jerk. He was like, we are programmed to go to sleep when it gets dark. I'm going to invent an incandescent light. Really, it was just the filament that he did. The incandescent light bulb already existed. Protein if they're hungry, but not too much. And preferably no food too close to bedtime, because like the belly is grr, 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 and they know it. Because when we go to bed, we close our eyes, there's no noise, and now I'm aware of my thoughts and how my body feels. That's why kids are like, my leg hurts. I think there's a monster under my bed. That's what that's all about. Right? Because your brain is like, I want stimulation. And if you have ADHD, your brain is like, I really want stimulation. And so the thoughts and the body stuff comes to the surface. That's what's going on there. Just tell your kid that that's what's happening. Some kids are like, really? Oh, that's cool. And then it isn't an issue anymore. I've legitimately had that happen. Go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time every day, even on the weekends. I know it sucks. My kids are up at 6:30 every day, even on Saturday, even on Sunday. It's the worst. But oh well. The acronym for all of this is SHRED, by the way, S-H-R-E-D. Sleep, relationships, that's not what that should be. They're relationships, sorry. Have them. Oh no, I'm doing it right. I told you I was fuzzy-brained. Habits. Shred, S-H, right? Man, I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, audience. That was awful. And other audience. My humblest apologies. So shred, habits. The more you can establish habits, the less cognitive load you have. Offload anything you can into a habit. When's the last time you had to be like, I'm going to brush my teeth. Where is my toothbrush? Where is the toothpaste? Now what do I do? Like, you just do it. It just happens. And then you're brushing your teeth because it's a habit. So create those habits. You come home from school, you do your homework. Or you come from home from school, you eat a snack, you watch an episode of, I don't know, something, and then you do your homework. Whatever makes sense, right? In the morning, you get up, you eat breakfast, you brush your teeth, you get dressed, you go to school. Establish habits. Relationships. Foster them for your kids and for you. Because here's the deal. People with ADHD stink. We're the worst. And you need to have someone to complain about us to. And that's okay. Because neurotypical people stink too. And you are also the worst. And we have people that we complain about you too. So it's totally fair. Don't feel bad about it. Have those relationships. There's all kinds of studies about strong social bonds, help us live longer, help us with the quality of life. Have those relationships. Even if they hate Trump, even if they support Trump, I don't care. Wherever you are on that line, reach across it. Because we're not going to be okay if we can't figure that one out. Factor those relationships into what you do. Invite people over, even if you're always inviting people over. It just means you're the people who invite people over. It doesn't mean anyone's taking advantage of you or anything. Not that that's a conversation my wife and I have had far too many times. Because we're the people who invite people over, that's why. Yeah, but how come no one ever invites us over? I don't know, but they come over when we call them. Exercise. Cardio is king. 20 minutes to an hour a day. You're not going to exercise that much, and that's okay. Don't feel bad about it, unless you do. You probably exercise that much, let's be honest. But get what you can. Like, do it as much as you can. Get moving, especially in the morning. It clears your head. And allow frequent breaks to just move a little bit during the day. Do some Qigong or something. I don't care. Every Monday I do that. I do. I'm a brown belt in Kempo. I really do Qigong every Monday in the evening, and sometimes just during the day randomly. Diet. Our final shred letter. Diet. The supermarket perimeter diet. Right? Fruits and veggies, seafood, meat, eggs and dairy, and then get out of there. Not because there's like chemicals and dyes and junk. The science on that is vague at best and sketchy at worst. It's because this stuff is full of simple carbohydrates. Simple carbohydrates spike your blood sugar, your brain gets foggy, and then you're like, I feel foggy and tired because my blood sugar spiked and then crashed. I guess I'll have another Snickers bar. And the cycle repeats. Have a hard-boiled egg. Eat an apple. But, I mean, Oreos are delicious, and you're going to eat them because they're delicious. Just have 2 instead of 4. You know, it's fine. And every now and then, Linda's chocolate fudge cake from the Cheesecake Factory is amazing. That's my, like, I don't have to be productive for a day or two. Have some Linda's chocolate fudge cake and have brain fog for longer than I want to.
What about grains?
Grains?
Like,
Complex carbs are the way to go. So it depends on the grain. Typically, if it's white, don't eat it. So like rice, white rice is a simple carb. Whole grain brown rice is a more complex carb. Yes, chocolate cake is totally brown, but it's full of white sugar. It's not a plan. Sugar in general. I'm sorry?
Is there any study that the gluten-free diet would help kids with ADHD?
No. In fact, we're finding no one is allergic to gluten. They're allergic to another protein that tends to accompany gluten. So that's fun, but I don't remember the name of that thing anymore. I learned about it like last week, and I have ADHD, so let's be honest. So set clear expectations for your kids, right? What are the consequences? What do I want you to do? Be specific. Spell it out. They have trouble learning. It's a learning disability, right? I'm going to show you some stuff that we have out front just so that you see it and you know what it is, because I know we're getting late. These cups are like magic. You can use them for homework. I'm fine, I don't need any help. I need help, but I can keep going. I can't do anything until you help me. Your kid can be doing homework. This can just sit on the table next to them. right? At first, everything is going to be red, and you're going to have to be like, no, I mean, yes, you're right, you can't do number 7. But you could have gone on to number 8 and then circled back to 7 later. Like I didn't have to get interrupted. Does that make sense? You have to teach them that a little bit. I have parents who used it as an emotional indicator. The parents might be having a hard day. The kids might be having a hard day. I'm fine. I'm right on the line. Like, I need some help de-escalating, which might mean avoid me or might mean give me a hug. Who knows? And I'm just gonna murder you if you come anywhere near me, right? Like, don't talk to me. So that's another way to use them. I use them, I work at home. Interrupt me all you want. Only if it's important. Like really, if you want some milk, you better have wanted that milk for 45 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Someone better be bleeding. But it's just an easy feedback tool. And you don't have to talk. We talk too much as parents. Shut up. Your kid is overwhelmed with the amount of talking. And just like you're overwhelmed with the amount of talking. Yeah. Just like your kid is like, hey, so I was thinking about Jurassic Park, and you're like, oh my God, East Lasorna, I don't even know which island that is. Why do I know there's islands? My kid's got a thing for Jurassic Park. In the same way, we're like, hey, so what's going on with your school and your homework and your hey, sit down, stand up, don't do that, right? Stop, talk less. Which is what this is for. These are better for younger kids, but if you start with the kids when they're young, you might be able to bring this all the way through high school. Pretty straightforward, right? Your kid is cleaning their room, and you come by, and you're like, hey. And they're like, oh. And you're like, and then you kind of like point to a corner, and you're like, and you go away. Right? Your kid has some friends over, and they're making a ton of racket, and you're like, and then all of your friends' kids think their dad is really weird. But it's okay, because you've got the charm and charisma to pull it off. And then a little while later, you're like, you have to talk. Can also go with this one, if that's better for you. I used to use this when my kids were going to sleep because I have identical twins and they sleep in the same room. And every now and then, my arm would drift into the room like this. And they would start laughing just like that because how ridiculous is that? But they would quiet down. And a little while later, they'd get a little, they'd laugh a little bit and I'd be like, shh. Because I'm that dad who pretends he's mad at his kids for giggling over something he did that was funny when they're trying to go to sleep. And pull it out, and off we go, and they've de-escalated. And I helped them de-escalate because I didn't talk to them, because often talking escalates. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time.